I'm delighted to see so many of you here. And I have the privilege of introducing William Louis-Dreyfus, but I have very strict orders as to what I am allowed to say and what I am not allowed to say. I have been told that the relevant information is that Mr. Louis-Dreyfus was first a practicing lawyer, then a businessman, then the father of 3 daughters, and during that course of time, he wrote and published a few poems, and also during that long period bought, quote, far too many paintings and drawings. You left out sculpture.
Yeah, true. There's a few of them.
But at the risk of alienating William, I would like to say that I have read some of those poems, and they're extremely good. And the collection is spectacular and varied and personal and unlike any other private collection that I've ever seen, and I've been looking at private collections for a very long time. We're the beneficiaries of that collection in having the George Grosz show downstairs. And I would like to go on record officially, and I hope this was being recorded as well. I have gotten probably more compliments for that show than almost anything I've ever worked on. However, they are completely undeserved. All the compliments have to go to you for having acquired the works in the first place. It's your choice. All I did was ask you whether you'd be willing to lend us the works for the show, and you very graciously said yes. So all credit goes to the discerning eye that chose those works.
Well, George had something to do with it.
Well, he made them, but you picked them. So I'm curious, when did you start collecting Grosz?
Well, if nobody will hold me to the accuracy of any answer.
You can tell us anything, we'll believe you.
Right. I guess in the early 70s.
So that's...
I don't remember precisely, but in the early 70s, and then over a 10 or 12 year period thereafter. And on the last Grosz I collected or obtained or whatever, bought, was just a few months ago, actually.
And that's the one that's on the cover?
That's the one on the cover, and it's so typical Grosz that I couldn't resist.
This spectacular drawing. Yeah. I mean, the wonderful thing about this whole group is that, of course, they're Grosz when he was still Grosz, before he came to America.
Yes. Yes, he, I suppose, was in a way chased out of Germany.
He pretty well chased himself out of Germany. Yeah. I mean, he was, as you know, he was a rabble rouser from the start.
Yes.
And someone who was constantly, he was violently anti-Nazi. But as a very young man, he joined the German Communist Party. And then once he went to Russia, he met Lenin, he met Trotsky, came back to Germany and resigned from the German Communist Party.
Right.
And of course, he became very disenchanted with America and went back to Germany.
Yeah. And some people say that his drawings, his work when he came here in, I guess, the middle 30s.
33.
Yeah. Didn't improve, actually went the other way.
Well, I always thought it was some kind of falling off caused by not being in touch with the things that really got him going. Yeah. And that's a self-portrait, by the way, speaking of things that got him going. And
yeah.
But apparently, from what I've read, he made a very conscious decision to work in a different way in America. And it certainly wasn't an improvement. No. I also discovered, and I was completely unaware of this, I don't know if you know about it, there's a whole group of watercolors about Texas.
No, I didn't know
in
that.
Dallas. I mean, somebody must have commissioned them. I can't
And they're
think.
of Texas?
Yeah.
goodness.
They're about as unlike the show downstairs as you can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean,
can
who
imagine.
knew?
Yeah.
But I don't know if he went to Texas. I haven't found out enough about it.
Yeah.
Anybody know? So the most recent one, this has been over a very long period that you've been, that's very early. That's pre, well, there's some very early ones downstairs, which are the kind of penny dreadfuls, the brothel scenes and the rape scenes, and he was doing this kind of sensational literature illustration. They weren't necessarily used as illustrations, but they seem to have been inspired by newspaper stories, many of them. And then he becomes totally politicized by World War I, and that's the Grosz we really know. But that same incisive line is in the very early work as well. What attracted you to him in the first place?
Well, strangely enough, I think it was the subject matter. And by that I mean what Grosz chose to draw and paint that reflected his view of humanity. And my youngest daughter years ago came home from school with a what do you call those things you stick in your car? You know.
I know what you mean, yeah.
A bumper sticker.
Yeah.
And the bumper sticker said, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. And what I liked about Grosz is that he was paying attention the whole time. And I guess I liked his politics, and I liked his approach to the context in which he lived. Mm-hmm. The German upper classes and then the German victims.
Am I misremembering, is he the only German expressionist in your collection, or are there
Yes,
others?
yes. No. Well, I didn't like the others quite as much, except for Beckman, and Beckman was always too expensive to buy the whole time I was trying.
It's too bad. We'd love to do a Beckman show.
Yeah, I would love for you. Yeah, I regret not having. I think Beckman and Grosz are the superstars.
Well, I completely agree with you. So I must say I find there's some Kirchners that are pretty fabulous, but the MoMA did a very good show of those a few years ago, the Berlin street scene.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that Grosz is probably the most overtly political artist in your collection. Or am I misremembering there as well?
Yes, well, I'm not, he's very clearly political, and I think he's even motivated sometimes exclusively by that urge. I don't know too many other artists who are as directly political. Daumier is a political artist, but sort of calmer than George was. And
you have a Daumier. You have a very good one.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. If I had to do it over, I'd have nothing but Daumiers, I think.
You know, Degas collected him.
Oh, he did?
Yeah. He thought the way he could capture a whole state of mind and point of view just by the way he drew the body was fabulous.
Yeah.
He had a lot of them.
But who are the other political artists?
Well, that's a good question because, I mean, you know, we're so deluged with art that is supposed to be dealing with sociological issues and political issues and gender issues and God knows what. And most of it really isn't any good. And if I look back and think, well, what are the great works of political art? And of course, you know, there's Goya's 3rd of May.
Oh, right.
and then you start, and Death of Marat, and then you're kind of, you've got a lot of fingers left over to find things that are that good.
Yeah.
It's hard to, it's hard to think of political art that is really good art also. And Grosz is unusual in that he does both.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the reasons that we were so thrilled to be able to do this show, given the kind of burdens that are attached to a good deal of art now. It's a kind of, okay, folks, this is how you can do it. Maybe that'll help. Although, maybe, at least for the students here, it'll help. Of course, Grosz being only part of the collection, which is, I think enormous is a fair word to attach to it.
Yes, it's certainly bigger than was planned. If there was a plan, and I think the collection shows that there wasn't really a identified purpose in making a collection. I mean, when I knew I had one halfway through, but at the start I had no idea that that's what I was doing. And,
the dealer, Andre Emmerich, used to say that a true collector was someone who kept buying work even when all the walls were filled.
Right.
And
well,
you are definitely a true collector.
In that sense, yes. Yes, I am.
When did you start?
Oh, well, if there was a starting point, that is to say, in terms of a work of art, the first thing I got was some Kandinsky watercolors, which how that came about in this. I have to tell the truth here, right? I can't make it up.
We'll never know the difference.
All right. I was, this is years ago, and I had just been given a bonus in my job. And it was a sizable bonus for back then, and for me at that time. And I didn't know what I'd had 2 of my 3 daughters. I didn't know what to do with the money. And I didn't trust the stock market. I didn't understand any part of the financial world, still don't. And I noticed that Max Ernst paintings were selling for more than Kandinsky watercolors. And I figured that couldn't be. So they were having a Carl Flinker, remember that name? The gallery in Paris? Anyway.
I know the name.
He was having a Kandinsky show, mostly of Kandinsky's wife's watercolors.
Gabriele Munto.
Yeah. And I bought up a bunch. And I said to myself that I was doing it because it was a wise financial thing to do, but I think that didn't have very much to do with it. After all, it did strike me that if Max Ernst was worth more, Kandinsky was a master, and that couldn't last. So that's how it sort of started, and then I didn't need very much encouragement to keep it going. The next thing I bought was De Buffet head. And from there on, it was off to the races, ending up crowded out by paintings as I am today.
Do you still have the Kandinskys?
I have some of them. I have some of them. I'm not sure I should tell this story or not. The prices of paintings, I didn't never expect that they would rise to where they've gone. And
I don't think anybody did.
yeah, but even back 10, 15 years ago, before the real madness took over, I thought that from a sort of family financial planning point of view, that I couldn't really justify having that much wealth hanging on the wall. So I, by this time, I'd given the paintings to my children, and so I sold them, the Kandinskys. And I sold them for what I thought was a very good price. And then, lo and behold, the person who bought them brought them back to the markets at a very bad time in the markets, so I bought them back. And then I sold them again. I have 4 left, which I'm delighted to have, and I've always regretted selling anything. So that's the curious story of.
Who came after Dubuffet, if you can remember?
Oh my! Well then, what came after Dubuffet? Collecting is a little piece of madness. It really is. Folks who collect are a little bit crazy. It's like being bulimic. And I always had an eye for what was hanging on the wall, any place.
Mm-hmm.
And I always had this internal conviction that I knew better than most what a good painting was. I still have that conviction, although I've been proved wrong several times. But nothing dissuades me from that particular vanity. And I guess about this time I saw at the Pierre Matisse Gallery, which is a great gallery of the past, the likes of which we don't have anymore, I fear, an artist in a 3-man show there whose name was Raymond Mason, and an Englishman living in Paris. And I went completely nuts and stayed nuts for 45 years where Raymond was concerned, so that I bought up a lot of Raymond's work. There were 2 of us in the world that did that, me and another fellow. And he was exceedingly unpopular as a commercial matter.
He has a big relief piece in the Tuileries, though, permanently installed.
Where?
In the Tuileries.
Yeah, it is. It's a.
Sorry. There's a large Raymond Mason relief sculpture which is permanently installed in a wall of the Tuileries near the Place de la Concorde end.
Nice. I have its twin up at the. Anyway, I collected a lot of Raymond's work, and I get a real kick out of looking at paintings, things that hang on the wall, and making judgments about them, which I sort of express by collecting, I suppose. The collection doesn't have the usual suspects.
No, that's one of the really exciting things about it.
Yeah. It would be more exciting if it did have the usual suspects.
Because
it would be, as you may know, I'm glad to tell all you folks, the the collection, and most of the collection, I've given to the Harlem Children's Zone, which, if you don't know what that is, you should find out. It's a marvelous organization that looks after the education of the children from age 1 through college in a certain section of Harlem. And eventually that means that the paintings will be sold, and because they can use the money, they can't really use the paintings. So if it had the usual suspects, Harlem Children's Zone would be much happier. And I would too,
I
for
can
that
see
reason.
that. Yeah. But quite apart from that, it's thrilling to see a collection that is so clearly personal. I mean, no one was telling you what you should be buying. It looks like everything there is something that you got excited about.
Right. A good friend of mine over the years was a fellow called James Lord, which is a name you probably all know. He wrote the biography of Giacometti. And he was a close friend of mine for many years. And he turned me to Giacometti when, and so back then the sculptures were, even then, very expensive. So I got a very good group of Giacometti drawings in the collection. And I've concluded, I hope not by virtue of that the best of what Giacometti did was his drawings anyway. But that may be sour grapes on my part.
Well, I've always liked the drawings better than the sculpture, but that may be a failing on my part, too. Maybe I should publicly ask you whether maybe the next show we could do at the studio school would be of Giacometti.
Oh, sure.
Good, I've got witnesses.
Sure.
I'm shameless about these things.
The studio school is in my view, a very important place, especially in today's art world, where quality doesn't seem to play as big a role as money and fashion, which is a great shame, but that's a poison that hasn't affected this place. And
No,
so anything,
certainly not. Although we could certainly use some money.
yeah, I know.
But this, this skylight is no longer leaking, so it's a step in the right direction.
Right.
It's, we're a profoundly unfashionable place, as you all know, and I think we turn out some wonderful artists, which is, just hope other people think so too. I'm curious about the, well, I won't say the shape of the collection, but the very Catholicity of the collection is probably its most noticeable quality.
The very what?
Catholicity of it.
Oh.
In the sense of it's going from, you have self-taught artists. You have wonderful Thornton Dials. You have sublime James Castles. You have trailers.
Yeah.
And you also have Frankenthaler, and you have some of Graham Nixon's absolutely best works.
Yeah.
You have Stanley Lewis. So it's Sangram Majumdar, and these are artists that that actually quite a few studio school alumni, which is very nice. Paige Pedri sculptures, Carlos Regalic's drawings. We're very proud of that.
I was just thinking the other day, going to the gallery where the Paige Pedri work is, and I was struck by how good I thought it was. And then I wondered, it must be very difficult to be a good artist because you're likely not to get noticed. And that must be an internal struggle of some kind, that you artists have to put up with. And I don't know how you do that. It would drive me nuts.
I think there's a difference between making art because it's an internal compulsion, that it's something you have to do, and making art as a career choice, which you see in a lot of contemporary art schools, where this is a cool thing to do. I was on a panel. I was not on the panel for once. I attended a panel at which a group of young sculptors were talking about their work. One of them said that he was not really a sculptor, that he was really a photographer, but someone had given him a book of photographs of Shaker furniture that had measured drawings, and he thought it would be interesting to build these things. So he was building Shaker furniture twice as big, twice as high and twice as wide, but the pieces weren't twice as thick, which I thought might have been a deliberate decision to do something cartoony, and it turned out he hadn't even thought about it, but that's another story. And someone asked all the panelists whether they had known when they were in art school, when they left art school, that they were doing what they were now doing, or they would be doing what they were now doing. And this young man said no, he had no idea he'd be making sculpture, but who knows, in 5 years I might not be making art. It was a completely...
Goodness.
It was a career choice. It was not a compulsion.
Yeah.
So for him, it was not a problem. For someone who must do it, it can be a problem.
Yeah.
But, Chardin told Diderot, apparently, Diderot quotes him, that he should go easy in reviewing the salon because it's very hard even to make a bad painting. So can you imagine how much harder it is to make a good one?
It's a lucky thing he didn't live in today's world. It looks quite easy to make a bad painting in today's world. I think.
Probably. It's, what is the connecting thread among all of these very diverse works that you have?
Yeah.
If there is one.
Well,
apart from the fact that it's all work that you like.
Yeah. Well, I've made some mistakes, but I think I recognized them early on and corrected it as quick as I could. I was asked that some time ago, what I thought might connect all these works in my mind, or what they all had in common, because they're quite different in certain ways. And I think the thing they have in common is that they all represent, and I don't quite know how to say this, an artistic, an effort to make a product. That may be why there are no minimal works in my collection. I think all of them represent the artist at work. And I think they all have that in common. And I think that's very important to me. I'm not sure that I take to work that doesn't have that aspect to it. That's why, for example, I'll say something terribly silly. It took me a great long time to appreciate Agnes Martin, is her name? Yeah, because I thought that didn't represent any work at all, and of course it does. But so I make mistakes with not too great frequency, but some frequency. And I forget what you asked me.
You just answered it.
Oh, okay.
A lot of the artists whom you have in your collection are very much alive and making work today. Do you visit studios?
I do, yes. And I've been extremely lucky with a good number of the artists that I have. I've gotten to know them. And I didn't do that in order. I was very conscious of the fact that the collector shouldn't interfere, and neither should the gallery owner for that matter, but that's another issue. I remember telling Raymond Mason that he showed me a work that his gallery in Paris had insisted that he make. And it was, I told him it was the only bad thing I'd ever see him do. And I think artists need to be left to their own creative devices. So I'd love to go to artist studios, but I just go to look. And I'm conscious of the fact that you don't want to influence the work. Yeah.
Is there anyone who isn't in the collection who you would really, really love to have in the collection?
Oh, yes. Well, I would go around and grab up all the Daumiers I could find, but that might take a little bit of doing. Or, and let's see, who else? Well, curiously enough, I had a tiny little epiphany not long ago, having spent years really disliking Cindy Sherman. And I saw a show of hers in Dallas, which was breathtaking, amazing. And I'm not saying that I pined for Cindy Sherman, but I am saying that if one came about and it was $10.50, I'd buy it.
I think you're safe these days. Is there, what's the most recent thing you acquired?
Wait a minute, see if I can get a truthful answer out of this. My colleagues who work with me in this collection may not even know that I've done this. I can't quite remember. The most recent thing I've acquired, I believe, is painting by Avital Berg, who's a
Studio School alumni.
And whom I think very highly of.
That's a great tribute to the Studio School.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of very good people here.
We think so. Maybe we should open this up to questions.